The next morning, everyone who had known and loved Mendelssohn wanted to pay their respects at the deathbed. The house, stairwell, and entrance of the complex became crowded with people, ranging from members of the orchestra, friends, family, to concert attendees. Outside in the courtyard, couples strolled by to mourn the loss of such a staple in musical society, who was far too young to have his melodies silenced. It was now many hours after the occurrence. The respected ones arrived for the corpse, which by now was quite pale and rigored. The sight was to everyone's dismay, as it was transported by casket to a carriage hearse. While most followed alongside the carriage down the street, I stayed behind at the apartment. I happened upon young Mocellis standing in the doorway of Mendelssohn's office. The adolescents sketched it, being sure to add the details in decor. The sheets of music were left, stacked in an organized fashion, just as orderly Felix liked it. My heart hurt too much, so moved on from the lonely office to join the procession outside. On the 8th of November, a beautiful and dignified funeral was held. A choir of 500 sang, accompanied by organ and trombones. The music echoed through the main hall of the Paulenkirche. Felix's casket sat a few paces before the musicians. With the lid open, he was lying peacefully in a bed of morning flowers, as if the music were soothing his deep, breathless sleep. After the funeral service, the casket remained in the church until 10 o'clock at night. A small group, including myself, stood around when the lid was slid over. My heart lurched, watching Felix, still so young, become enclosed. With that, Ignaz, Robert Schumann, and Niles picked up the casket and proceeded outside to a carriage headed for the train station. Felix was to be laid to rest in Berlin. I walked home after all was done. My breath felt like ice while looking up at the sky, illuminating a night blue by the glow of stars. Each one twinkled and glimmered. It was a sight to find enjoyment in, but in my cold heart, all I felt was the train chugging away. The next week, a concert in memory of Mendelssohn commenced. I was too heartbroken to take my spot among the violins, so watched from the audience. The whole concert was but a tragic torture. Lingering across the entire Gewandhaus was the feeling of something missing. The musicians' faces expressed sorrow, having followed their beloved director's corpse out of the church only days prior. It seemed impossible to have music again feel the same. The tones of the instruments themselves seemed to have a weep of their own. Each horn held their note as if trying to hold on a moment longer. The strings' emotions came from within their wooden frames. To keep beauty, the woodwinds flourished and embellished like the beautiful blossoms placed before a grave. I listened, but my mind felt rather blank with the wavering flutes pulling at my heartstrings. Still in disbelief that Felix was no more, his music remained alive as ever, making it hard to fathom the circumstance. Herr Hiller, now director of the Dusseldorf Orchestra, sat beside me. He could hardly listen to the tones of the young man he once knew, creative in every aspect of art. Tears left Hiller's eyes through the whole thing, wishing at heart that he could have made better amends with Felix. Never again shall I feel that same November chill when taking a stroll through the wooded outskirts of Leipzig. The bitter trees were dewed with frost, and the colored leaves were crisp under my feet. I looked out to find the sun setting a bright gold, sparkling over a babbling brook. In the clearance of foliage were fields, bare from harvest, in which gave an air of desolation. Not another soul wandered about, which I rather preferred in my moment of being. A large rock laid amongst the frosty grass, so I sat upon it, my thoughts soaked in the lonely air. Recollecting everything up to this point, it was bound to come. Felix, with his limited time alive, by no means wasted a minute. The adventures, discoveries, music, each one being but a moment in history. Whether his music lived on or not, it was in the least that his efforts pursued in the years to come. Had he not pursued the performance at the Sing Academy of Bach's oratorio, leaves in question if some of the greatest music considered should be as lost as it was before. Thanks to Felix's vision for discovery, the public welcomed the revival of old compositions, and the music became as we know it today. Felix, in the end, wished his own compositions to live on, using his strength to give even his smallest songs the perfection in which always hovered before him. But were it conceivable that all his works perished, the remembrance of his poetic nature would alone suffice to afford the German public that such a being was born and bloomed there. Though I have told you this story of Felix, the true factor of influence upon him was his dear sister Fanny. Her death ultimately caused his own demise. The malady that affected their family factored into his death, but in truth, it was the heartbreak of losing his reason for hearing melody that finished him. Fanny was the source that ignited Felix's desire to make beautiful music. She was the reason he took such care in revising his compositions, so that each work became the best it could be. Now, as the sky is growing dark, I must be getting home. So, in conclusion to this biography of Felix Mendelssohn, I leave you with a quote of his concerning the music composed over the course of his short life. Ever since I began to compose, I have remained true to my starting principle, not to write a page, because no matter what public or what pretty girl wanted it to be thus or thus, but to write solely as I myself thought best, and as it gave me pleasure. Felix Mendelssohn Bartholdy.